Well, everyone, the end is finally upon us. After 4 hours of meticulously breaking down every last second of this film, how none of it makes any sense at all, and how it mercilessly assassinates the characters from the original trilogy, we've at long last arrived at the final episode. The episode where we go over how this climax is running on absolute insanity without any semblance of logic, where we discuss the damage this movie has dealt to the franchise overall, and most importantly, where we break down how Woody's character is thoroughly assassinated beyond repair in the final 5 minutes of screen time. So, let's begin, shall we? Woody, Bo, and Annabelle load up in the pram while Chucky pushes them, and the Looney Tunes and Neo ride their way through the carnival in the Skunkmobile on their quest to reach the carousel in time. Unfortunately, the pram crashes, forcing Woody, Bo, and Annabelle to get out while Chucky is left behind, and who knows what happens to him. But here's what we do know. Annabelle certainly doesn't give a hoot about what happens to him despite all he's done for her throughout this movie. So just don't think about it.
Too many people. Gonna need an alternate route.
Too many... What? Use the Skunkmobile to move through the carnival! That's literally the whole point of this stupid thing. To be able to navigate through large crowds undetected. And if you can't fit every single toy in the thing at once, then just send them to the carousel in waves. This RC car zips around at the speed of sound and the carousel is literally right there. Make one trip carrying one load of toys, then make another carrying the remaining load, and boom, you've all made it to the carousel. The skunk didn't crash, only the pram did. Where did the skunk even go? How did you get from here to here? Who wrote this? Okay, back to the RV now, and this scene is an absolute nightmare, and I almost don't even know how to break this garbage down. So let's just take this one step at a time and try to get through it together. So Jessie's plan that we mentioned last episode goes like this. Buzz sits on top of the RV holding Mrs. Potato Head's ear, relaying instructions for how to get back to the carnival. Then Mrs. Potato Head relays the instructions to Trixie, who then does this.
Recalculating. Take a right.
What? And I'm sorry, I can't resist. What the actual f*** is happening right now? How did Buzz get from the floor of the RV to the roof? Literally, how did this happen? What, are you gonna tell me that he climbed out through the sunroof? Because if that's the case, then I call BS. There's no way in the world the toys managed to open up the sunroof while blasting down the highway without anybody in the family noticing. Tell me something. What happens if you open any windows in your car while driving down the highway? The sound of the other cars driving by is no longer muffled, not to mention the rapid pressure oscillation that results from doing this, on top of the sound of the sunroof opening in the first place. How did nobody notice any of this in the time that it took you to get up there? How did Magnum not see you in the rearview mirror when you were climbing up top? But more importantly, how is the dad falling for this? How could anybody with a tenth of a brain possibly fall for this? I don't care if it takes you all day to fix a flat tire or not. You would not hear the GPS voice.
Left turn in 0.5 miles.
And then hear this voice.
Take a right.
And somehow come to the conclusion that these two are in any way similar to one another. Not to mention the fact that Trixie's voice would be coming from the floor below you and not the GPS above you!
Turn right!
No, turn right!
Not to mention the fact that GPS voices do not scream erratically! This could never work! But it doesn't stop there! Because as if this wasn't already insane enough, Magnum eventually realizes that the GPS is busted and decides to ignore it, thus causing Mrs. Potato Head to pull Trixie back and, I guess, go to the backup plan, which is for Buttercup to sneak underneath his feet and pull back on the gas pedal, causing them to take off at a speed of sound? What? What are you doing? I can't, what is this script? This doesn't help you. Trixie just said,
Turn right.
Must be broken.
meaning you need to get the RV to turn right. If you slam on the gas pedal, all you are going to do is accelerate forward and probably blow right past the turn you need to take. You have absolutely no control over the steering wheel right now, and yet the RV is going to somehow magically end up exactly where they need it to be. How? How does this work? You can't control where they're turning. You can only control the acceleration. What is happening right now? Also, this is a really great way to get people killed. You are haphazardly messing with the acceleration speed of a massive RV without any way to know if there are pedestrians in your path. And even if you try to say that Buzz can tell them what's ahead, I got news for you, buddy. If a random kid decides to run out into the middle of the road, Buzz can't possibly communicate that information fast enough for Mrs. Potato Head to tell Buttercup to let go of the gas. And even then, that's dependent on the dad slamming the brakes in time. You are barreling headfirst into a carnival filled with children. This is the absolute best way to get all of them killed, and you do not care at all. What are you doing right now? Also, how does Magnum not know what's going on anyway? way? How does he not see the toys down by his feet in his peripheral vision? There's a very bright, colorful unicorn contrasting against the dull interior of the RV floor and you just don't notice him? Seriously? If I'm driving a car and I suddenly feel the gas pedal yanked away from my foot at full throttle, the first thing I'm gonna want to do after I slam on the brakes to try to get a hold of this thing is to look down at the floor to see what in the world just happened to the gas pedal. Is Pearl not all curious as to what's going on? Did she not glance over at the pedals? How does nobody see these toys? They're right there! It's not exactly hard to see the pedals when you're driving a car. How does he not notice this? Also, why are you spastically slamming on the brake pedal? Just hold it down with your foot and don't let go. Tapping it like this is what's allowing the RV to move forward and potentially get even more people killed. Just hold down the brake and the RV isn't going anywhere. The engine isn't going to overpower the brakes. What are you doing? What is this horror show of a scene? Why do the toys not care about endangering the people around them, including the family in the RV? How is the RV being steered along the exact path they need it to be when they only have control of the gas pedal? How did Buzz get up here? How did nobody see or hear the toys down there? All you had to do is have Jessie cut the tire again and you could have avoided this whole mess. Who wrote this spaghetti mess of a scene? Meanwhile, back at the Annabelle show, the toys are getting ready to send John Wick to jump across the carnival to form a zipline they can use to cross the rooftops?
This is the fastest way to the carousel.
No! How is this the fastest way to the carousel? For one thing, you have to wait for the Ferris wheel to rotate into the exact correct position you need in order to make this jump. For another, you had to find this string somewhere that would be the exact length you needed to form a zipline across the gap. For another, you had to climb up to the top of this thing in the first place, which is much harder to do inconspicuously than just moving along the ground or using the skunk mobile that was custom made for navigating large crowds. Nothing about this method was fast. In fact, apart from walking around the entire globe in the opposite direction, you may very well have picked the slowest possible way to reach the carousel. He's literally jumping through the air illuminated by the moonlight, followed by all of you ziplining directly above the crowd below. How does nobody see this? Especially when there are fireworks going on right now? Why are there random fireworks at this exact moment in time? Where did they come from? Why do they only last for as long as Neo needs to make his jump? Why does no one care about anything in the script?
The fireworks was kind of a late-breaking idea to have fireworks behind him.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all. We never see fireworks for the rest of the movie. It's just behind Duke.
I swear I don't even have to do anything. The writers are doing all the work for me. Who wrote this? What is happening? Okay, whatever. So they somehow make it across without anybody noticing them, but just as they're about to make it to the carousel, Annabelle gets distracted and derails the whole mission. What does she get distracted by, you may ask? Well, she sees a random lost kid over the railing on the grass below. How? How did you see her there? You were way too far away from the side of this roof to be able to see that kid. There is no way you caught her in your peripheral vision. But then Woody falls back to stare at the kid with Annabelle, and then he says,
Change of plans.
because they're gonna give her the chance to get with another kid. Okay, cool, so let her go down there and have her happy ending. Whatever, I don't care anymore. Just let her go and then the rest of you can keep running toward the carousel. But no, the whole world stops dead in its tracks and literally every single one of the toys in this group goes down to just watch Annabelle get with a kid. You don't have time for this. You need to get to the carousel and get ready to quickly regroup with the other toys. All you're gonna do is watch her. You don't need to be here for this. What are you doing? Oh wait, but the Looney Tunes roll a baseball over to direct the kid's attention to the doll? Why? You didn't need to do that! Just pull your string and that will instantly pull her attention towards you. This is all a gigantic waste of time! You didn't need to be here for this. You're all just wasting time. Where did you even get this baseball from? Oh, and because the script hasn't already thrown enough luck in the way of our characters, after the kid picks up Annabelle, she walks out of the shadows, then immediately bumps into a security guard 2 inches away from her. Literally, the instant she decides to step out of hiding is the same instant that a security guard just happens to be walking by. It's all just luck! Everything! It's all luck. There is no cause and effect in this script whatsoever. The plot just runs according to whatever needs to happen in every single situation. Who wrote this garbage?
Randy did an amazing thing here, which is the music here is the same music from the classroom scene where Woody is helping Bonnie in the classroom. This is Gabby helping this little girl. When I heard it on the stage, it was genius. I just realized he connected those two scenes in a way that I hadn't even really thought of myself.
Yeah, because this absolute legend of a man is doing everything he possibly can to try to salvage your dying script because he knew you weren't gonna fix this yourself. So he works as hard as he can to dress up your movie in as much pretty packaging as he can to make you look like less of an idiot than you actually are. Well, I'm sorry, Randy Newman, but no matter how good your music is, it's not enough to cure this turgid base of a script.
So this whole time, it's always about Woody and Bo working together. And that's so that when we get to the goodbye scene, we wanted to make it feel wrong that they're splitting up, so that you want them to stay together.
Listen to that phrasing. That slimy, deceptive, awful phrasing. They wanted to make it feel wrong because he knows that Woody would never, ever in a million years choose to spend his life with Bo rather than his friends and kid. So they have to manipulate you into thinking otherwise, or else this movie doesn't work. They quarantine all the original toys in the RV and never spend any time with them because they don't want you to think about them. They just want you to think about how awesome Bo and Woody are together.
They're such fun characters because they have no connection to our characters, and they're brand new. The fun of this movie, to me, was all these new characters that we can create and bring to life.
Think about all the new toys. Forget about the old toys. The old toys suck. How in the world can you paint these two as an inseparable team who have each other's backs after how they've interacted throughout this entire movie?
That move of rolling the softball is an actual thing that carnival workers do to get people to play their games.
I don't care if it's something carnival workers use, not if the way this is used in the story doesn't make any sense. You didn't need to do this to get the kid to notice you. None of you needed to be down here except for her. You're all just wasting time. And so it was that Animal got her happily ever after, even given all the terrible, awful things she's done throughout this whole stupid... Oh, for Christ's sake, you're still going at it with the RV nonsense? How are you doing this? Oh, okay, so they end up exactly where they needed to go despite having absolutely no control over the steering wheel, and all because everyone in this van is a grade A moron. So the cop comes over to the window and talks to the parents to figure out what in the world just happened, and there's no way that Magnum isn't going to get arrested here.
Dad's totally going to jail.
What? Why are you happy about that? What was this RV scene? You know why this scene from Toy Story 2 works so well, and why this one is noodling around like a neurotic octopus? Well, let's break it down. First of all, in order for the toys to get this vehicle exactly where they need it to go, it takes the entire team. Rex navigates, Ham and Potato are in control of the gear shifting, Slink takes the pedals, and Buzz steers. And even with every single toy pulling their weights, they are just barely able to keep this car straight and steer it where they want to go. But from an outsider's perspective, you just think that the driver of the truck literally fell asleep at the wheel or just came back from having a round of Buzz Light beers. It's not a flawless plan from the toys by any stretch of the imagination. It's just barely manageable and very erratic driving, but it's also incredibly well coordinated, which is why they're able to catch up with Al at the airport. But the most important thing about this scene is that they have the truck all to themselves. There are no other humans they have to account for, so they have maximum communication and can control every single part of the truck. Because you need to have both of those things in order to get the vehicle where you want it to go. But in Toy Story 4, not only do the toys only have control of one pedal, but they also can't talk to each other or communicate efficiently because the family is still in the RV. This is absolutely ludicrous. This makes no sense at all. And yet, our big brain director has this to say.
We've seen the toys always drive cars around from previous films, but this felt like a fun way to do it in a different way.
Different does not equal better, you pillocks. Do not try to use the fact that they've driven previously as an excuse if you aren't going to put in the legwork that film did in order for this to make sense. Then it is revealed that the dad isn't arrested? How? How was he not at fault here? He can't prove that Toys hijacked the vehicle, and even if he knew that was what happened and tried to say that, there's no way they'd believe him. And all it would take was a cursory inspection of the vehicle to check to see that nothing was wrong with it, and then the erratic driving would fall onto him entirely. How are you not arrested right now? Whatever, so then Buzz tells everyone to get up top, which doesn't make any sense because you don't need to drag every single toy onto the roof just to get Woody back into the RV. Unless, of course, you have the foresight to know that there's going to be an emotional ending. Oh yes, everybody. It's almost time to talk about that ending. We're almost there. Just a little bit longer. But first...
What the... You've got to be kidding me!
How is this working? This couldn't possibly work, because all you'd have to do to defeat this problem is just go around to the other door and open it up. How is Fourface even able to push this button as fast as the dad is able to pull on the door handle to open it? And with that, we finally arrive at the final scene of the movie. The grand finale. The conclusion of the Toy Story saga. This film is already in tatters. The plot is a jumbled mess of either contrived luck or straight up impossible nonsense. You've destroyed Jessie by undoing her character arc of overcoming her trauma and fears. You've destroyed Buzz by turning him into a complete and utter moron in spite of his brilliant capabilities throughout the original trilogy. You shoved all the classic characters into an RV and made all your new ones horrendously unlikable and relied on talented celebrities to carry your film. But the one thing you haven't majorly damaged yet is Woody. Throughout this movie, he has consistently maintained his core character trait, his loyalty. He always stood by his friends. He's always done right by his kid. He's been loyal to the people he cares about for infinity and beyond, and that has been untouched by this movie. Until now. The one loose thread this film was barely hanging on to is about to break, and at that point, there will be nothing left to salvage. Because as Woody says goodbye to Bo and prepares to head back to Bonnie and all his friends, he makes one last decision. And that decision is to leave Buzz, Jessie, Slink, Rex, Ham, Potato Head, and all of his friends, including his kid whose name is written on the bottom of his boot. He's going to leave them all behind and pursue a life with Bo Peep instead. What the fuck? Are you kidding me? Are you yanking my chain right now? When I saw this in theaters for the first time when we got to this scene, I was left staring open-mouthed at the screen. I could not believe what I was watching. It was like my whole world got turned upside down in an instant. And I am so sick and tired of hearing the exact same pitiful defenses for this ending over and over again. So strap in, everyone, because I am about to explain why this ending is straight up insulting to everything the original trilogy set up since 1995. Woody's arc throughout the first movie is all about coming to terms with the fact that he may not always be Andy's favorite toy. He's got a brand new, awesome Buzz Lightyear action figure. What kid wouldn't want to play with that all the time? But even if Andy's interests fluctuate over the years, it doesn't matter because Andy will always have a special place for him. And as Woody says himself,
it doesn't matter how much we're played with. What matters is that we're here for Andy when he needs us. That's what we're made for, right?
Which is a mantra he carries with him all the way through to Toy Story 3. And by the end of the first movie, Woody evolves past his desire to always be the #1 favorite toy. In Toy Story 2, he has to come to terms with his mortality as a toy, and the fact that one day Andy is going to grow up and may not want to play with him at all anymore. And that inevitability is what tempts Woody to go with the Roundup gang to a museum in Japan. But then, after fighting tooth and nail and crossing the county to bring him home, Buzz Lightyear reminds him of a very important lesson that Woody taught him in the first film.
Somewhere in that pat of stuffing is a toy who taught me that life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid. And I traveled all this way to rescue that toy because I believed him.
Which is what snaps Woody right out of his trance because he realizes that
I can't stop Andy from growing up, but I wouldn't miss it for the world.
And that
this is what it's all about, to make a child happy. And you know it.
This is the crux of Toy Story 2. His insecurity following his arm ripping, leading to him having to wrestle with the inevitability of Andy outgrowing him and potentially not playing with him anymore. But he evolves past it. He contemplates an alternative, realizes he'd be crazy to do so because being with his kid is way more important to him than being on his own forever, and then comes home and promises that...
You still worried?
About Andy? Nah. It'll be fun while it lasts.
I'm proud of you, cowboy.
Besides, when it all ends, I'll have old Buzz Lightyear to keep me company. For infinity and beyond.
And that is what leads into the third movie. He confidently stands by his statements from the past.
But we've always said this job isn't about getting played with, it's about
being there for Andy. We know.
Whatever happens, at least we'll all be together.
For infinity and beyond.
And after their adventures at Sunnyside, he realizes that the best thing for his friends isn't to be stuck in the attic forever. It's to be given a new chance at making a child happy in the hands of Bonnie. And he wants to stand by their side in this decision because Andy's all grown up. Woody's fulfilled his role in being there for him when he needs him the most. He's helped give Bonnie an afternoon of a lifetime, and he saw a future for his friends there. So he placed himself in the box along with everyone else, even when the original plan was for Andy to take him to college. But at the end of the day, it wasn't his choice to make. He wouldn't have left his kid unless Andy gave his approval, unless he manually passed on the torch. Woody wasn't going to be sneaky or deceptive about it. He planted himself in the box in full frontal view of Andy. If Andy decided that he still needed Woody at college, then he would have gone with him. But they both made the choice to let each other go, and Andy passed on the torch to Bonnie. Woody's journey throughout the first 3 movies is what led him to where he is today. He learned invaluable life lessons every step of the way, and in his final scene with Andy, he gets to hear this.
But the thing that makes Woody special is he'll never give up on you. Ever. He'll be there for you, no matter what.
It's an absolutely beautiful ending from every conceivable angle, and it perfectly concludes his journey as Andy voluntarily chooses to pass him on, and Woody chooses to stay with his family only with Andy's blessing, vowing to always be there for Bonnie no matter what with all the knowledge and wisdom that he's gained throughout his life with Andy. And this stupid movie spits in the face of all of that. Every lesson that Woody learned throughout the original trilogy means nothing now. He learned that he doesn't have to be the favorite toy. He taught Buzz that life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid. And during the period of time when he'd walked back that mantra, Buzz retaught it to him, and he went back to Andy learning that even if he can't stop Andy from growing up, that he wouldn't miss it for the world. Because it's all about being there for your kid when they need to and making a child happy, which is solidified as Woody stays with Andy throughout all his teen years as he's ready to go off to college and never plays with him at all. He promised Buzz Lightyear that when it all ended, he'd have him to keep Woody company for infinity and beyond. That whatever happened, at least they'd all be together. But all of it, every substantive message those films sent, every promise the characters made to each other, it's all mercilessly thrown out the window as Woody runs into Bo's arms ready to leave behind his friends and his kid. No, scratch that. They're not his friends. They're his family. After everything they've been through together, they are a family of toys who have survived the most harrowing obstacles any toy could ever go through together. And now none of that matters at all, and the fact that Woody is actually making this decision is utterly indefensible and insulting, not just to Woody's character, but to every single person around the world who ever felt any sort of emotional attachment to him for the principles he upheld and the character he used to be before this ego-driven, bold-faced liar came along and tore it all to pieces without a care in the world.
I love Toy Story. I saw the first two before I started working here at Pixar, and so to be asked to direct this movie was such a huge honor and terrifying, because I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to mess it up.
Meanwhile,
because I couldn't imagine any situation where Woody could, without being a complete jerk, leave his friends behind knowing the situation they were in.
Right, and Woody's character would never do that.
He just wouldn't do it.
Cooley, listen to me. The director of Toy Story 3 doesn't even agree with you. Don't you dare try to claim you love this series when there is this much evidence proving how much of an insult your abysmal dumpster fire of a film is to the original trilogy. And you know something else? Lotso and Stinky Pete are proven right by this movie. Their motivations for enacting their evil plans boil down to the belief that toys don't last forever, and they're all just waiting for the day they get thrown out or replaced unless they seek sanctuary somewhere else. And now they are proven correct by this movie's ending. Bonnie isn't playing with Woody anymore, so Woody is justified in seeking a better life somewhere else. Toy Story 3's ending was all about the passing of the torch, about Andy giving his toys to a young girl who would get more use out of them than he would storing them away in the attic, and how their lives still have meaning even after Andy grows up and moves away because they can bring happy memories to a new kid. But Toy Story 4 says forget that message, being with another kid is useless! Woody should go break out on his own and leave Bonnie behind. And as the final nail in the coffin, it's even contradicted by events in this very movie, because all Woody has been telling the other characters, such as Forkface, Annabelle, and Bo, is about how wonderful life is when you're with a kid and that they need to help their kids make great memories together. And he delivers all these monologues in the very same movie where he abandons his kid forever. It's pathetic and almost poetic in its stupidity. Woody is going to leave his family, whom he has been with for almost 2 decades, to be with a girl he hasn't seen in 9 years, who has spent the entire movie patronizing him to everyone she encounters and speaking with the most condescending intent imaginable, even when some of the situations that they wound up in were entirely her own fault. They want you to believe that after all these scenes...
What did I say? I lead, you follow. You really want to help? Then stay out of my way. Just stand there and be quiet. I'll do the talking. My friend? No. He's my accessory. Some toy thought it would be a good idea to wander into the aisle.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, does it?
Because the best route is behind the shelves.
That would have been a better route, wouldn't it?
Toy sounds like a complete idiot.
He does. Plenty of kids out there. It can't be just about the one you're still clinging to.
That it is a happy ending for Woody to go spend his life with this girl. Absolutely not. Get out of here with this garbage. Bo Peep has not received anywhere near enough screen time to outweigh the time that Woody has spent with Buzz, Jessie, and all the other toys. It doesn't even make any sense within the context of this movie. You know how I made a point of remembering that scene where they try to make it out as if Bo was burying her emotions about her time spent with Molly and reminiscing about how wonderful it was to be loved by a kid? Yeah? Well, not anymore. Now they want you to believe that Bo was ascended to a new level of understanding and was right all along to abandon everything and become a lost toy, which is extremely funny considering this line from Toy Story 2.
A dangerous world out there for a toy.
And another thing, just because she may have been somebody you loved 9 years ago, that does not mean she's still that person. In fact, it's crystal clear that she has a radically different attitude toward the people around her now. And you could have used this as an opportunity to send a message about how people change over the years, and that you should be under no obligation to stay true to someone just because you used to know them when you were younger. That could have been an invaluable message to send to kids. But instead, you're sending the message that if someone verbally abuses you, patronizes you, condescends you at every available opportunity, and blatantly puts their own needs above your own every single time, that they actually really love you and that you should abandon your family and friends who are willing to risk everything to save you and go live with that person instead. Fuck off! You are quite possibly the most irresponsible filmmaker I have ever seen in my life. You've shown absolutely no respect for the integrity of the world of the Toy Story movies. You've shown absolutely no respect for any of the original characters or what they stood for, and you've displayed absolutely no maturity when it comes to immensely serious topics and have instead chosen to send morally reprehensible messages all across the board to your incredibly young and impressionable audience. But then, even after being faced with all that indisputable evidence that this directly spits in the face of Woody's character, the one thing that people will always say is that Bonnie isn't Andy, and my response to that is, so what? She's still his kid, and she is the person whom Andy entrusted Woody to! The justification that the movie wants you to believe makes sense for this decision is that Bonnie doesn't want to play with him anymore, that Woody's just been sitting around the closet feeling useless, and therefore it's okay for him to leave Bonnie behind. But if you actually think about this for longer than 2 seconds, you should immediately realize why that doesn't hold up under any scrutiny at all.
The third time you haven't been picked this week.
Meaning that is only 3 out of the 7 days in a single week that he hasn't been played with, and follows up with this little exchange.
I don't know, I don't keep count. No, you don't have to. I'll do it for you.
Meaning that he is keeping track of how many times Woody hasn't been played with, and the highest number he has is 3. Meaning that Bonnie has only chosen not to play with Woody for a whopping 3 days when Woody went for way longer not being played with by Andy. And no, it does not matter that Bonnie isn't Andy, because after all the development that Woody has undergone, and after being played with for almost 2 full years, there's no way he went 3 days without being played with, and then all of a sudden he thinks it's doom and gloom for him. Especially when there is a scene in this very movie when Bonnie is playing with Woody. Yeah, remember earlier when I said there was a shot in that stupid travel montage that would nuke the entire film? Well, I guess it's time to reveal it. It's this one. This one shot shatters the entire movie to pieces. There was a small amount of wiggle room that defenders of the character assassination had to work with, and it was, well, Bonnie didn't care about him anymore. But that little bit of wiggle room has now been shattered beyond repair, because not only does the amount of times Woody wasn't picked not support that assertion, and we have verifiable receipts from the 2 years prior to this movie proving that to be false, but there is literally a shot in this movie where Bonnie is happily playing with Woody. Not to mention the fact that this film wants you to think that Bonnie is over Woody and that he needs to seek out a new life, and yet presents him with a new child who clearly loves playing with him, and yet he abandons her at the playground without a care in the world. This scene nukes the messaging of this film into oblivion. Again, you've just committed script suicide. Again, because after this scene, you can't fall back on the defense that Woody wouldn't leave his friends behind to go with Harmony. If you want to tell the audience that Woody should abandon Bonnie if she's done with him, then you cannot simultaneously present him an opportunity to
help create happy memories that will last for the rest of her life,
and then do absolutely nothing with it. This film just killed itself. Again.
Very early on, we had to solve the problem of, well, why don't the toys just go to Molly? She's perfectly viable, Andy's younger sister. Can't the toys have a life with her? And we shot that down right away by adding this beat of showing that Molly's just kind of grown up a little too fast. You know, she's already beyond her years and not interested in toys anymore.
Oh, what's that? The director of Toy Story 3 took the time to think about potential problems with his plot and figured out a way for it to make sense that the toys wouldn't go with Molly? What a concept. A concept that is nowhere to be found in this movie, but especially in this scene, as the film presents a perfect opportunity for Woody to fulfill the mission he preaches about, and yet does nothing to explain why he doesn't. Awesome. And not only that, remember that tangent I went on earlier about how Bonnie would have had to recently write her name on Woody's boot? Yeah? Well, now it's time to bring that back around. You cannot argue that Bonnie doesn't care about Woody anymore when she would have had to write her name on his boot sometime within the last few months, because we know that for 2 Christmases in a row, Andy's name was still firmly planted on Woody's boot while Trixie had Bonnie's name written on her foot. And to make it even worse, the film is trying to tell you that Bonnie cares more about Jessie than she does about Woody, which is extremely funny since Bonnie didn't write her name on her boot. She painted over Andy's name on Woody, Buzz, and Jessie, but only replaced his name with hers on Woody and Buzz, not Jessie. It does not matter how you slice it, this doesn't work. Woody's decision is a blatant character assassination regardless of whether Bonnie loves him or not. But the fact that Bonnie clearly does actually care about Woody, and cares a lot about him based on what we see in Toy Story 3, only serves to deal even more damage to his character and completely and utterly nullify the ending of that movie. Because Andy trusted Bonnie. He passed along his favorite childhood toy whom he promised Bonnie would never give up on her no matter what. And she loved Woody. She was about to cry when Andy reflexively pulled him away from her, and was overjoyed when he agreed to let her have him. But because Bonnie didn't play with him for literally 3 days, Woody thinks it's totally okay to betray Andy's final decision and run away with Bo Peep. And don't you even dare try to tell me that.
Oh, come on. Kids are fickle these days. They change their minds on a whim. It makes perfect sense for Bonnie to randomly lose interest in Woody.
Well, first of all, she obviously didn't lose interest in him. But fine, let's assume that Bonnie has cast Woody aside and has completely lost interest in him because she's a fickle little kid who frequently changes her mind on a whim. If you think that is a valid defense that actually justifies what happens in this film, then I beg of you,
I implore you,
I plead with you to please think about your own logic. If you are arguing that Bonnie is a fickle child who changes her mind on a whim, then under your own logic, she could literally wake up tomorrow and decide she wants to play with Woody again! Uh-oh! Looks like your own defense has crumbled your position. Should the other toys that aren't Forkface leave Bonnie? She clearly only loves Forkface right now. Why don't all the toys go off and have their own Avengers since Bonnie clearly isn't playing with them right now? This doesn't work. No matter how you cut it, it doesn't work. Woody betrayed all the lessons he learned throughout the original trilogy and Andy's decision to entrust him to Bonnie. If Andy knew what was going to happen, he never would have given Woody up. This ending is nothing more than a giant middle finger to the beautiful ending of Toy Story 3, and to claim otherwise is to be deliberately ignorant to the events and developments that have occurred throughout this series. But you know what makes this scene even worse? Buzz is the one to tell Woody to go.
She'll be okay. Bonnie will be okay.
Buzz Lightyear, the one who told Woody point blank in Toy Story 2 that
life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid.
Is the one who tells Woody that he should leave Bonnie and go live a life with Bo Peep. Get out of here, you stupid movie. And then all the other toys just magically teleport onto the awning. How did you all get up here? How did Rex climb up? How did the Potato Heads climb up? How did Rex fit his body through this tiny hole? How did any of you climb up there this quickly? Why did you come up here? Were you all given the script ahead of time so you knew that Woody was going to leave? Oh, just forget it. We're speeding through the rest of this. I can't take this anymore. Woody gives Jessie the sheriff's badge. All the original toys hug him goodbye with an extra long one for Woody and Buzz, only for Forkface to be the one to get the last hug! Why did you leave the door? You had one job. One. That's it. And you couldn't even do that. This is just so he could be here for the big goodbye, but he had no way of knowing what was happening here. Buzz gave you a single job and you couldn't even do that properly, you useless gnome. I hate this spork so much. How did you even climb up here by yourself? He gets the last hug, not Buzz. Forkface. Buzz off, you stupid movie. So then, for one final kick to the teeth, they close out the movie by playing the same music that played at the beginning of the first Toy Story movie. Followed by the triumphant music that played when the Claw rescued them in Toy Story 3 for a sad scene, because tonal consistency isn't something this film knows how to do, whereas nostalgia pandering is something it's very skilled at. All while we get this final pair of lines.
To infinity and beyond.
Which doesn't make any sense because you can't hear each other. You're just saying it randomly. There is no context that makes this impactful. You're literally just saying half a phrase even though the other person can't hear you. Solve this movie! Then the credits start rolling. Some more stupid stuff happens with the Looney Tunes, and we get one last scene in Bonnie's bedroom where Jessie comes back from Bonnie's first day at first grade and oh, look at that! Dolly came to her senses that Woody was onto something with the whole going with Bonnie to school thing and adopted that policy herself, but waited until Woody left so she didn't have to admit that he was right all along and she was wrong. Why are you so terrible? Then it is revealed that Bonnie made another toy come to life out of arts and crafts supplies and an eating utensil, meaning that this is her second arts and crafts project in 2 years. So again, I'd like to ask, how was Forkface the first time these toys encountered an arts and crafts project coming to life? How did Andy never make something like this when he was in school and bring it home? The world building in this universe is ruined. Why did you do this? Why did you tear this universe to shreds without a care in the world? And just like that, the film closes out with Forkface promising to explain everything and telling her that he doesn't know how they're alive, and and then this soul-crushing fever dream of a film finally fucking ends. What an absolute travesty of cinema. What an utterly unrepairable blemish on Pixar's otherwise nearly spotless record of filmmaking. The only redeeming aspects of this movie are the voice actors giving it their all and the graphical fidelity of the animation. Undoubtedly, the animators and tech team did an outstanding job in crafting one of the most visually stunning animated movies ever released, but that's all it has going for it. I would say its soundtrack is incredible, but the only reason why that's the case is because it's comprised of tracks from the original trilogy. It looks pretty, and it sounds good, and something I've learned over the last 2 years is that's all you need to impress an audience. Pretty colors, shiny lights, and good music. But absolutely nothing else about this movie works to even a minor degree. Let's start with the plot. This film's plot is fundamentally broken, by which I mean that nothing about it functions properly. There's hardly a single scene where something isn't lacking a logical through line, and anytime you find one, it's almost always replaced by the characters getting immensely lucky or unlucky through lazy contrivance and nothing more. So let's quickly review this film and see just how many times the plot stops dead in its tracks if things run logically. The driveway never existed at their house, meaning this entire opening sequence can't take place, and Woody would have never had a reason to go to Molly's room and never would have known that Bo Peep left and never would have gone through the scene that helps define his final decision in the movie. If Woody actually listened properly to the clock and realized that he's only not been played with for 3 out of the 7 days in the week after 2 years of loving playtime, he doesn't make the decision to leave Bonnie. If the parents hear Woody jump into the backpack, he doesn't go to kindergarten and can't create the plot device that runs the entire film. If Woody is spotted at any point during the kindergarten scene, he's confiscated and can't go with the other toys on the road trip to look after Forkface. If even a single element of this scene, such as the lunchbox, the spilled out art supplies, the spork, or the crayon box weren't in this room, Bonnie doesn't make Forkface. If Forkface stays as an eating utensil, not a sentient toy, which is something we'll talk about very shortly, then there is no plot device to drive the story forward and Woody never jumps out the window, thus derailing the adventure. If Woody has the brain capacity to realize that he's being played with by Bonnie in this scene, he realizes that he's not being abandoned by her and still cares about him, and thus he never leaves. If the parents hear this insanely loud voice line, "It's a secret mission in a charted train. Movie over. If Woody and Buzz's peripheral vision isn't heavily compromised and they actually see Forkface climb up the stupid shelves, movie over. If Woody never makes this ridiculous Freudian slip, Forkface doesn't have any ammunition to tell Annabelle that she can then use against him and thus convince him to let her take his voice box. If Bo had been taken to literally any other antique store in the world, or she decided to just drive away in the skunkmobile, or if they missed the carnival by 1 day, or if the family had driven to any other place, or if Forkface successfully jumped out of the RV at any other point along their trip, none of this nonsense unfolds. If those lights don't shine on the ground, Woody never notices Bo's lamp. If the busload of kids was a few minutes early or a few minutes late, if Jessie doesn't pop the tire, if Bo doesn't fix her arm, if the sticky hand doesn't reach this high, if Buzz voice buttons don't tell him exactly what he needs to do in every situation, if Woody and Bo can't bounce to the top of the antique store, if the characters actually employ a sensible plan to reach this cabinet instead of the moronic one that they chose, if even a single second of this entire action scene ran with any sense of logic, if Bonnie's backpack didn't teleport, if Buzz doesn't abandon Woody, if Bo came to her senses literally 5 minutes earlier, if the toys were unable to get this RV to where it needed to go, which they shouldn't have been able to do because they can't control the steering wheel, if any of these things adhere to basic logic, cause and effect, and just simple consistency, plus all the dozens of other problems that I broke down throughout these past 5 videos, this film immediately comes to a screeching halt. I'd also like to remind everyone that the director candidly admitted that
none of this makes any sense.
It is true that if the plot were the only thing that was broken about this film, then perhaps we could just label it as isolated stupidity that doesn't tarnish the other films in the series and simply move right along with our lives. Kind of like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Only the thing is that it's not just the plot. This film does significant damage to the world of Toy Story, and it's all because of this stupid spork. Because prior to this point, the rules of sentience were very simple. If you are a toy, you come to life. Whether you were as anthropomorphic as Woody and Buzz, an animal like Rex or Ham, a vehicle like RC or the school bus, a utility piece like Lenny or this telephone, or the food toys likely stemming from some kind of restaurant set, you were a sentient toy. But this spork is not a toy. It's a spork. It's an eating utensil. There is absolutely no reason for this thing to have to come to life at all under the rules that this universe has established. But now that he is alive, it raises horrifying questions. Is it truly the case that the rule is simply that inanimate objects can come to life no matter what they are? That I could just throw googly eyes onto literally anything, possibly even the planet itself, and it could magically spring to life? Because if that's true, then that's turned the Toy Story universe into a horror universe. That means this bed could be sentient, or that backpack, or that glue bottle, but that none of them have the ability to communicate and are therefore trapped in an eternal frozen existence where they can't scream for help or do anything. That is absolutely horrifying to think about, and if your response is, oh come on, there's no way a bed can come to life, we are dealing with a spork here. That is just as ridiculous a concept, and yet these writers want you to think that that makes sense. So now we're simply extending their logic as far as it can go and seeing how horrifying the reality that they're crafting is. It also raises some rather, interesting questions regarding the types of toys that adults play with. And it's not because the child's imagination is what brings these things to life, because aside from the fact that we know from Toy Story 2 that toys were already alive before they even leave their box, we see Bonnie playing with plenty of inanimate objects such as this cardboard spaceship, but none of them come to life because this was never a problem in the original trilogy until these brain-dead writers decided to bring a spork to life because they are that creatively bankrupt and didn't care at all about how it was going to impact the franchise's world building as a whole. This script is broken. Almost nothing runs with any logical train of thought, being either blatantly contradicted by itself or previous movies. Anything that does proceed through cause and effect is only allowed to unfold due to an insane amount of luck and contrivance, resulting in one of the laziest and most inept stories that takes no care for the rules established by its predecessors whatsoever. But perhaps you don't care about any of that. Maybe logical inconsistencies don't bother you to even a minor degree. Maybe blatant contradictions both within this movie and when compared to previous films are totally meaningless to you. Maybe you don't care whether anything that happens in movies makes any sense at all, just so long as there's an impactful, heartfelt, meaningful, and thought-provoking message for the audience to take away and keep with them long after the credits roll. Here's the thing about that. The messages that this movie communicates to its audience aren't just irresponsible, but downright evil in some instances. To begin with, we have the issue of Forkface's behavior in the beginning of this movie. This is a character who literally wants to throw himself away, who doesn't want to live in the situation that he's found himself in, and so has resorted to the trash, which has an inevitability that we all know about. And he does this throughout a montage during which this happy-go-lucky song is playing in the background with lyrics that are very deliberately addressing the topic of suicide, which is only further confirmed by external information about Randy Newman's intentions with writing this song. To be blunt about it, there is absolutely no way that people who wrote this movie were completely unaware of what they were conveying with this scene. You'd have to have the dullest mind on the planet to spend years of your life working on this movie and never once have the thought of, you know, this kind of sounds like we're talking about suicide here. When audience members came to this conclusion within minutes of this character's introduction, what the hell is your excuse? That is not to say that you can't tackle serious subject matter such as suicide in films. Of course you can. But if you are going to deal with this subject matter in your movie, then you cannot treat it as a joke. But that is exactly what you've done here. You've created a character whose entire arc is literally about how he wants to die and portrayed his mental struggle as a funny joke for your impressionable audience to laugh at. Not to mention the fact that you have him overcome his mental state and desire to throw himself away after a single conversation where Woody says that he's Bonnie's trash and then he immediately finds new meaning in his life. It is not that simple. That is not how this works. The topic of depression and suicide is so much more complex than this, and yet this film treats them as a funny haha and such a bouncy, jovial thing to watch unfold throughout this montage when there's absolutely no way nobody at Pixar noticed what this scene is saying. Completely irresponsible. And let's not forget about how the director and writers feel about fan theories and the message that they are sending by including this book title. They are communicating to the audience that their fan theories are nothing but jokes to them. They laughed at them for caring about the movies that their company was creating, let alone the film they themselves were making. And they did it in such a way that only the most devoted of fans would notice it, because you have to actively go out of your way to listen to the director's commentary on the Blu-ray disc.
This was just the goal to destroy the Pixar theory. This book that Mom is reading right there, you can't see the cover, but it says Beyond Infinity, debunking the crazy theory of a shared universe or something like that.
The average moviegoer is never ever going to hear this line of commentary in their lives. The only people that will are those who care enough to listen to the entire commentary track, such as people who comb through these films and behind-the-scenes extras looking for clues to further fuel fan theories. And it is those very people that the director is laughing at for caring and using their critical thinking skills and applying it to their passion for these movies. And just to reiterate, I do not subscribe to the Pixar theory because I don't think it holds any weight whatsoever, as discussed earlier. So my contention with these clowns has absolutely nothing to do with a personal investment in the matter. Their stance on the Pixar theory is the same as mine, but that doesn't matter at all because the message that they are sending is that if you take the time to think about their films on a more analytical level, they think that's hilarious and want to demean you for doing it. Which I suppose doesn't surprise me, since if you think about this film's structure for longer than 5 seconds, you'll immediately see how badly it crumbles to pieces. Next, this film believes that you should be rewarded for emotionally manipulating people, torturing them, and stealing their organs, because that's basically what a voice box is to a toy. It's an organ, and that you should be handed exactly what you want, even if you never apologize, try to make up for what you did wrong, or even acknowledge that you ever did anything wrong in the first place, just as long as you have a sad backstory, and it's absolutely disgusting to think about. But even worse than that is how her motivations can be, and already have been, interpreted by the audience in the context of disabilities. The core of this villain villain's motivation is to steal Woody's voice box because she was born as a defective toy and believes that she needs to fix her defective part in order to be accepted by Harmony as a proper toy. I'm sure you don't need me to explain how harmful this message is, but I'm going to do it anyway for those who aren't quite following along. The film portrays Annabelle's motive as virtuous and benevolent, and her motives are that she believes she isn't worthy of Harmony's love until she fixes her voice box. And the movie ends up proving that she's correct, because the only reason that the child at the end of the movie feels comfortable taking her home is because she pulls her string and Annabelle asks to be the kid's friend. And that is a terrible precedent to set, because it doesn't take a lot of critical thinking for someone living with a disability to watch this movie and understand what it's trying to say on a thematic level about living with disabilities. It's saying that society would deem you unworthy of love unless you find a way to fix your disability, which is utterly insulting, not to mention embarrassing considering how intelligently, maturely, and respectfully Pixar has handled these subjects in their previous movies, and not having the characters literally think that they need to fix themselves to be accepted. This is irresponsibility of the highest caliber. Then, we come to what this film is trying to say about Woody's love for Bo Peep. The film wants you to believe that these two toys have feelings for each other, and that as a result of these romantic feelings, it makes sense for Woody to abandon his kid and family, which we are going to talk about in just a moment. But just run with this for a moment. This is portrayed as a healthy, loving, romantic relationship. The director believes that this is a showcase of a pair of people who think the world of each other and want to spend their lives together. He is communicating to the audience through this film, this is something you should look to as a shining example of what it means to be a healthy, respectful, romantic relationship. And that is actually disgusting to think about, because this is how Bo treats Woody throughout this film.
What did I say? I lead, you follow. You really want to help? Then stay out of my way. Stand there and be quiet. I'll do the talking. My friend? No. He's my accessory. Some toy thought it would be a good idea to wander into the aisle.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, does it?
Because the best route is behind the shelves.
That would have been a better route, wouldn't it?
Toy sounds like a complete idiot.
He does. Just about the one you're still clinging to.
Sounds like she really loves you. You would have to actually be deranged to look at these interactions and tell me that this is someone who respects Woody to even a minor degree. This isn't respect. This isn't love. This is verbal abuse and selfishness running rampant throughout the script, and she is rewarded for this behavior with love from the person she's abusing. And no, the scene where Bo realizes how much of an idiot she was and that Woody's heart was in the right place all along doesn't matter in the slightest, because aside from the fact that this scene only exists for the sake of the audience and she never actually apologizes to Woody for how she treated him, even if she did apologize to him, that would not make up for the things she did. The simple act of saying sorry or acknowledging that you were wrong doesn't immediately make up for the action you undertook. When Woody accidentally knocks Buzz out the window, he tries to clear the air with him, but because Buzz thinks that he tried to kill him, he doesn't just immediately say, "Oh, okay, you feel bad. Well, I guess we're friends now." It takes the entire rest of the movie for these two to come to trust each other and become the best friends that they are. But in this movie, Bo simply says that,
"You gotta love him for it."
And even if we give maximum benefit of the doubt to her and assume that this is her acknowledging that she was wrong to treat Woody the way that she did throughout this movie, that does not suddenly absolve her from her endless parade of condescension and verbal abuse throughout the runtime of this film. Disregarding the butchered character motivations for the movie ending the way that it does, it is portrayed as a happy ending that Woody chooses to leave his family and go off to live with an abusive romantic partner who not only acts consistently condescending to him, but also takes great joy in doing so. This is not healthy. This is not normal. This is not okay, no matter how much this film wants you to think that it is. Do not look to this as an example of a respectful relationship, for the love of God. And last, but certainly not least, we have Woody's final decision. Irrespective of how it's totally against his character for him to do this, think about his choice in terms of the message it is sending out. Since the very beginning of the series, the toys have been a metaphor for parents. When Woody is referring to Andy as his kid, he means it in every substantive way that it matters, and that he's there for him when he needs him, and he watches him grow up over the years and ultimately move away to start a life for himself. But hey, don't take my word for it. Take the word of our old friends.
That speech that Woody gives right there when he's carrying Forky, it's so beautiful. I remember when Andrew first wrote it, that reading it and going like, I have young kids, but I don't have kids that are out of college. I don't know what that's like. Only somebody who had kids that are out of college could write this and have this kind of emotion.
So, now that we've established that, let's think about this ending again and see where that gets us. We are watching this parental figure decide that he wants to abandon his kid and run off to pursue his dreams instead. Are you not quite getting the picture? Well, then allow me to repeat the exact same sentence, but this time replacing the visuals on screen with something else. We are watching this parental figure decide that he wants to abandon his kid and run off to pursue his dreams instead. And if you say, "What? Come on, he wasn't pursuing his dreams," you're right. It's worse. He abandoned his daughter because he needed a break from what was going on at home. It's actually much, much worse, but my point is still the same. And the difference between The Greatest Attorney 2 and Toy Story 4 is that this game acknowledges that Miko Taba screwed up. It goes out of its way to make crystal clear that what he did is morally reprehensible, and even goes so far as to have him admit that what he did was wrong, whereas Toy Story 4 portrays it as perfectly fine, a happy ending for everyone actually, that Woody abandons Bonnie to go explore the world with Bo Peep while simultaneously saying that the toys are meant to serve as parental roles for their kids. This movie establishes very, very explicitly that Woody is instrumental to Bonnie's happiness. Even if she isn't actually playing with him, he is the reason she is able to make it through kindergarten orientation. Had it not been for Woody in that classroom, Bonnie would have been an emotional wreck, and we would have had an inside-out situation that could have potentially dealt serious, long-lasting damage to her mental state to be impacted at such an early age. Andy entrusted him to Bonnie, and Woody has shown not only extreme proficiency with, but also immeasurable passion and happiness for ensuring the joy of his kid. And yet, in spite of all that, this movie tells you that responsibility and care for your child be damned. If you meet someone that you fall in love with, it's more important to go run off with them and live happily ever after, even if it means leaving your child in the care of someone who is utterly incompetent at their job. And it's not a decision made by the parent in the best interest of the child like some movies that tackle this idea brilliantly. It is a selfish choice made with nobody's interest in mind other than himself, which aside from being blatantly contradictory to who Woody is as a character, is an absolutely horrible thing to do when we are talking about abandoning a child. Riddle me this. Would you accept this decision if it was literally a father leaving their kid behind to go run off with someone he fell in love with after literally one day? Or is it okay because they're toys? Because I refuse to adhere to that. This film's messaging is utterly irresponsible and evil, and the thought that kids watch this movie and may have come away from it thinking that these are morally conscionable things to do honestly terrifies me. But all of that pales, absolutely pales in comparison to what this film does to its characters. It's not enough that it tells a story that would require me to lose a significant chunk of my brain in some horrible accident to think that it held together under even the slightest amount of scrutiny. It's not enough that it directly spits in the face of the universal rules established by the original trilogy, raising horrifying questions about the sentience of inanimate objects in the process. And it's not enough that it sends absolutely horrific moral messages about family, responsibility, living with disabilities, depression, suicide, what it means to love someone, theorizing about movies, and culpability for wrongdoings if you have a tragic backstory. This film had to take a swing at the characters from the original trilogy. It had to sideline almost every major character by quarantining them all in an RV throughout the runtime and replacing them with celebrity cameos who are only there for their namesake and an excuse to sell more toys because they have absolutely nothing to do with the story whatsoever. The Looney Tunes have absolutely no relevance to the main plot at all. Really think about their involvement now. If you cut them out of this movie, all the major events play out just fine. They are only here because they wanted to get an iconic comedic duo into the film that they could plaster all over the marketing so they could say, "Hey, look at us, we got Key and Peele, you like them, right?" And it's the exact same thing with John Wick / Neo / insert Keanu Reeves character here because I refuse to call this toy by its actual name. It's Keanu Reeves, everybody! Don't you love Keanu Reeves?
You're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking!
Then you should love this character. That's all this is, just hiring popular celebrities to play your new characters in the hopes that they can effortlessly earn the audience's adoration without putting any effort into their personalities or development and simply borrowing the love of the actor in question and pasting it onto the character. Because this toy has absolutely no relevance to this film whatsoever. The entire quest to get his help from the pinball machine and make this jump had absolutely nothing to do with anything and was entirely pointless because Woody demonstrated that you can effortlessly run across the aisle and reach the cabinet doors without needing to do this stupid jump that puts you right in the line of sight of the dummies and unnecessarily endangers the mission. And any action he takes later could have easily been accomplished by far simpler methods that the script has to deliberately forget about in order to pretend that these characters are in any way important. The only new addition to the cast who has anything to do with this story is the stupid spork, Forkface. But even then you can't really call him a character because for almost the entire movie he's just trapped in the antique store. There was the potential for the writers to tell a really interesting, mature, and impactful story about existentialism, or actually tap into the serious and dark implications present with your character literally wanting to throw himself away. But instead, he receives absolutely no significant development at all. His existential crisis ends 10 minutes after he's introduced to the story, 2 of which consisted of a montage montage, and even more of which didn't even have him speaking with a more elaborate lexicon than just saying trash over and over again. And all it takes is for Woody to tell him that he's Bonnie's trash. No maturity, no intelligent discourse, no meaningful message to get across. His suicidal tendencies are played for a joke with happy, jovial music in the background, capped off by him ultimately deciding he wants to be a toy. And then from that point on, it becomes nothing but a plot device used to facilitate the rest of this broken story. Next, there's everything to do with how Annabelle is characterized. For the first time in the Toy Story series, the antagonist comes around to being on the good guys team by the end. Sid, the Prospector, and Lotso were never afforded such kindness. Lotso almost turned to the good side, but the toys were quickly proven wrong for thinking that would ever happen. But not Annabelle. This time, they want you to think that the villain was completely justified in doing everything that she did because all she wanted all along was to be loved by a kid. They try to paint her as having undergone some sort of redemption arc, but she didn't. She wasn't redeemed for her actions. She is not a villain who was redeemed, no matter how badly this film wants you to think otherwise. Annabelle did not undergo a redemption arc because she doesn't believe that she did anything wrong. She goes from, "I'm taking your voice box because I needed to be loved, so turn around, Woody," to, "I'm taking your voice box because I needed to be loved, so turn around, Woody, please." And that is the only change that happens with her character in this movie. She doesn't apologize for her actions. She doesn't admit her wrongdoings, and she doesn't try to make things right. She doesn't do anything like that. She does exactly the same thing that she was doing earlier in this movie, and if Woody didn't give his consent, she was going to take what she wanted anyway. It did not matter. And then the universe just keeps hand-delivering opportunities for success whenever the previous one fails to work out for her. I need you to understand this. Annabelle is a terrible person. She's awful. She tortures Woody and regularly attacks the main characters to get what she wants, shows no remorse for her actions, and is rewarded for that in the end. Meaning the only new toy we have left that can possibly salvage this new cast is Bo Peep. But big surprise, the writers have dropped the ball once again. To reiterate, the problem with her character is not that she's suddenly an action-oriented lost toy as opposed to her more docile nature from the first two movies. It makes sense for her to have to adapt to the outside world and naturally become a more action-ready toy as a result. The problems here are the gaslighting and her behavior toward other characters. Bo Peep did not act this way in the first two movies. She just didn't. I don't think you will find a single person on the planet who will try to argue that Bo Peep was always this way if you actually show them the first two movies. But because the writers are slimy hacks, instead of actually showing the struggles that she went through in the time between Toy Story 2 and 4, and visually demonstrating the process by which her personality and behavior has had to change to account for her new lifestyle, they took the shortcut. Only they didn't just take a shortcut, they took a cheap shortcut. They opened the film with a flashback to the time period of Toy Story 2 and retroactively changed how Bo Peep acted in order to gaslight the audience into thinking, "Oh, she was always like that," and "Oh, her dress was always like that," so that when you first meet her at the playground, you don't question how she's changed in the slightest, when all you have to do is simply watch any of her scenes from the first two movies to immediately disprove this notion within seconds. This is nothing but deceptive, manipulative gaslighting, and you are lying if you say otherwise. And how she acts to the other characters is absolutely insulting. She treats Woody like a moldy doormat throughout the entire runtime of this film, constantly impugning his intelligence and decision-making, blaming him for events that she could have easily prevented herself by taking very basic actions that we see her take later in the movie, talking with a condescending tone both to him and to other people when talking about him, and placing her priorities and desires above Woody's despite the fact that she only agreed to do this in the first place to help Woody, and the fact that they want you to think Woody would be willing to spend his life with her after all this is absurd. The only reason I can think of for why she was written this way was to make Woody look completely useless and stupid so that Bo looked infinitely better by comparison, which is, once again, slimy, deceptive, manipulative garbage. You do not have to make your old characters look like trash to make your new characters shine brighter by comparison. Athena Sykes isn't condescending to Phoenix and Apollo. The writers of Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice don't make those characters act like bumbling morons just to make her look incredible. They give Athena her own cases to shine, construct events that would naturally give her a majorly important role in the story, and allow her to make one of the most ingenious deductions in the entire series without painting her coworkers as half-brained seahorses. Rivet doesn't have to treat Ratchet and Clank like worthless idiots. She is initially standoffish due to not trusting the new arrivals as the dimensions are falling apart, but she is never condescending. And the game doesn't have to paint Ratchet and Clank as incompetent buffoons in order to make Rivet look awesome. They split the game equally between the two of them and allow them both to receive an adequate amount of screen time, giving Rivet the chance to shine all on her own without having to bring anyone else down in the process. But for some reason, these writers thought that the only way they could write Bo Peep to make her look awesome was to simultaneously write all the other characters around her that we love to look like complete idiots. Which brings me to my final point, and what is by far the most insulting, irredeemable thing this film has done. Out of all the damage it has dealt to this franchise, this is what stings more than anything else, and it is the deliberate, merciless assassination of Woody, Buzz Lightyear, and Jessie. If the movie could just nail this one thing, if it could just write these characters consistently with how they've always acted, if they kept their morals in line, if they kept their principles straight, if they didn't give them all brain damage, and if they didn't annihilate everything about them that people loved, then this film just might have been able to come out the other end of this mess in one piece, even in spite of everything else it colossally bungled. But it couldn't even do that. This is the absolute last straw. All they had to do was nail this one shot. It was this movie's one last chance to save itself, and it missed the target so hard it defied the laws of physics and crash landed and exploded in a fiery inferno. Let's break it down. Jessie's entire character arc was all about overcoming her fears of abandonment and claustrophobia, two fears that had consumed her existence since the moment Emily gave her up all those years ago. She was an adventurous cowgirl who wouldn't have been rattled by the most ferocious of enemies, but the one thing that would immediately bring her to her knees was any kind of enclosed space, anything to remind her of the trauma she underwent for all those years. And Toy Story of Terror finally allowed her to overcome that, to finally settle her nerves when her friends depended on her and her alone to save the day, and triumphantly kick open the box after an entire special of continually trying and failing to move past her fears, ready at last to take on whatever obstacle the world tries to throw her way. And now, in Toy Story 4, Jessie has regressed all the way back to the way she was at the beginning of Toy Story 2, terrified and immobilized by being stuck in a closet for a few minutes. Buzz off, you stupid movie. Buzz Lightyear is one of the smartest characters in the entire series by a long shot. Whether he thought he was a space ranger or understood that he was a toy, he was continually shown to be making remarkably intelligent decisions, taking into account every potential obstacle in front of him and tool he can use to his advantage to formulate a plan of attack by either meticulously thinking it out in advance or coming up with solutions on the fly. He was the one who masterminded the mission to rescue Woody after solving the mystery of who the identity of the kidnapper was and exactly where to find him all by himself, which not only speaks to his competence as a leader, strategist, and analytical thinker, but also to his loyalty to Woody. He would never, ever let any harm come to his best friend Woody, after all they went through in the first movie, and in turn, the entire series, they do anything for each other. Buzz doesn't even hesitate to leap onto Scud's face and put himself in serious danger when Woody is losing his grip. He immediately leaps out of the window to try to rescue Woody when Al kidnaps him. He fights tooth and nail at every opportunity, never letting anything faze him until Woody is safely back in his protection because, as Buzz says himself,
Woody once risked his life to save me. I couldn't call myself his friend if I weren't willing to do the same.
And now, in Toy Story 4, he is suffering from major brain damage as he fails to understand the concept of a conscience, despite clearly being able to think for himself in the original trilogy, struggling to make even the most basic of decisions without spamming his voice buttons to tell him what to do, and even worse, he repeatedly sidelines Woody in favor of moving the plot along. When Woody charges headfirst into the belly of the beast in danger of being torn apart by a cat and the Chucky dolls, Buzz shows absolutely no concern for him and instead runs away so he can be delivered a key by the plot fairy. When Woody stages a one cowboy souls into the antique store, ready to take on Annabelle's entire army, Buzz abandons him and runs back to the RV. He doesn't care at all. He pushes the buttons on his chest, they tell him to go home, and so he does. And all because the writers wanted to continue the joke. Buzz off, you stupid movie. And finally, we have Woody, a character whose core trait was his loyalty to his friends and his kid. He was established as a quick-witted, intelligent cowboy as well, but the number one thing you'd immediately think about upon seeing him was the thing that makes him special.
Is he'll never give up on you. Ever.
That no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem, he'd stand by his friends through thick and thin because he doesn't leave toys behind. He learned in the first movie that it doesn't matter if he's not the favorite toy. He'll still always be there whenever his kid needs him. He learned in the second movie that even when facing the inevitability of his kid growing up and not wanting to play with toys anymore, he's still going to stand by his kid through thick and thin as he watches him grow up. Because even if he can't stop it from happening,
I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Which is a decision that plays out in Toy Story 3 as he isn't played with by Andy for years at a time, still patiently awaiting the day when he may need him again. And in the final moments of the film, as he accepts that Andy is all grown up and doesn't need him anymore, he makes his choice to stand by his friends and go with them to help create new memories for a little girl who will get far more use out of them than Andy will. But he won't do it without Andy's blessing. Until his owner consciously passes him on to Bonnie, he wouldn't leave him behind, because that's who Woody is. And that is why his decision at the end of Toy Story 3 works so well. He doesn't want to leave his friends, and he doesn't want to leave Andy, but he understands that he will be of better service in Bonnie's care than in the care of a college student, and that the right thing to do is to go on with his friends. But his loyalty won't let him give himself up unless Andy is the one to pass him on. His loyalty to both his friends and Andy remains unaltered by this movie, and in the end, he upholds his promise to Buzz Lightyear that they'd always be together for infinity and beyond. But now, in Toy Story 4, all of that is thrown out the window. There isn't a single solitary thing about Woody's character that wasn't destroyed by this film. Andy was wrong about him. He did give up on Bonnie. He wasn't there for her no matter what. He abandoned everything. He left not just Bonnie, but also all of his friends. No, forget that. His entire family of toys that he had grown so close to throughout his adventures across these films and shorts. Also, he could go run off with a girl who spent the entire day impugning everything about his existence. This would never, ever, ever happen. Woody would never abandon his kid after not being played with for only 3 days when he's been lovingly played with by her for a full 2 years and was left in a toy box by Andy for even longer than that. And what makes it even worse is that Bonnie plays with him in this movie. Children can change their minds at a moment's notice, meaning that she may very well wake up tomorrow and decide that she wants to start playing with Woody again, only she's going to realize that she can't find him anywhere and start crying over it, and Buzz and the gang aren't going to be able to do anything about it because they will have absolutely no idea where in the world Woody is. Morons! This is not Woody. His character revolves entirely around loyalty to the people around him, not to condescending porcelain pricks, especially not when he is already shown in Toy Story 3 to have moved past losing Bo. Every lesson he learned throughout those movies is rendered entirely meaningless and directly contradicted by this ending. And the cherry on top of this nightmare cake is that Woody has to leave Buzz to get to this point. The friend with whom he's been to the ends of the earth and back, going through the worst obstacles a toy could possibly face, and who he promised he'd be with for infinity and beyond. And this film rips them away from each other, and the only way they're able to get away with it is by falsely manipulating the story and playing with the lighting and the music to make you think this is something Woody would do when it just isn't. The lyrics of the credit song say that I was a lonesome cowboy. You came along, changed my life, and fixed what was broken in me. You can't be happy when you're all by yourself. Even the lyrics of the song are trying to convince you this is normal, that Woody was entirely alone in Bonnie's room and that Bo Peep fixed something that was broken about him. No! Shut up! Can it right now, you abysmal clown rejects. Woody was not alone. He had his friends. He had Buzz. He had Jessie. He had everybody. Bonnie literally played with him in this movie. There was nothing broken about him to fix. Stop trying to manipulate the story to justify your garbage messaging. But this is what you have to do in order to pretend that this makes any sense. You have to alter the events of the series to try to suit your narrative and constantly try to reinforce your warped version of reality through the visuals and the music in the hopes that the audience won't notice. And you have to assassinate everything about Woody's character that made him who he is and leave behind nothing but a shell of his former self. That is 3 for 3. Woody, Buzz, and Jessie, all 3 heroes of the original trilogy, utterly destroyed by this steaming pile of garbage. This movie had the same effect on me as Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. I didn't realize how much the characters of the original trilogy connected with me on a personal level until I saw them all torn to shreds and their accomplishments undone. I didn't realize how invested I was in the characters in World of Danganronpa until this show bulldozed through all of it, and this game nullified every substantive character arc and major event that occurred throughout the series prior to that point. And I didn't realize how much I loved the world and characters of Toy Story, how close to my heart it all was, and how much it emotionally resonated with me until I saw everything about them that I connected with incinerated beyond repair by this movie. It doesn't matter what angle you look at this movie from. Whether your priorities in judging a film lie in its plot, themes, or character, all of those are fundamentally broken, and the only things that are quality are the visual fidelity, animation, music, and voice acting, all of which are nothing but decoration which without a competent base to lay them on will mean absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. Yes, the voice actors and musicians responsible for the dialogue and soundtrack are incredibly talented individuals who obviously did the best job they could to try to salvage this rotting corpse of a script. But it doesn't matter how smooth the voices of the people telling the story are if the story that they are telling has as much cogency as a shredded piece of spaghetti. And as for the animation, it's Pixar. You are guaranteed a gorgeous movie with this studio, but the quality of a film's visuals are determined by its budget, which we know is no trouble at all for Disney, and by the limits of the current technology. When the first Toy Story came out in theaters in 1995, it was a groundbreaking success. Nobody had ever seen anything like it because it was the first full-length feature film to be entirely comprised of computer animation, as opposed to the more traditional era of Disney animation, which only relied on CGI for things like the Cave of Wonders. But if you compare the graphical fidelity of this movie to Toy Story 4, it's not even kinda close in terms of which is more visually stunning, which is why using it as a metric for assessing the quality of a film is utterly useless. It can be a nice thing to praise if the substantive elements of it are exceptional, but it cannot save a film all by itself. You can be stunned by the animation, even mesmerized by it. You can be impressed by how far technology has come, but you cannot use those feelings to argue that this film is good because they are the very same feelings people had back in 1995. And if you were to say the same thing about this movie today, you'd be laughed at without remorse. The visuals of a film are always going to age, but a well-written script is timeless. And everything about the way this script is written, from the plot to the characters to the thematic messaging, is in tatters from the opening scene, and it only gets worse and worse with each passing minute. People love to immediately jump to Cars 2 as the worst Pixar movie. It's the punching bag of their catalog. And yes, Cars 2 is a big, steaming hot mess with a plot that runs on the laziest, most ridiculous and contrived chain of events that allows Mater to not only take the place of the American agent, but continue to serve as a spy despite repeatedly telling Finn and Holly that.
But you know I'm just a tow truck, right?
Plus a myriad of luck that keeps allowing characters to survive, such as Holly just so happening to be angled exactly where she needed to in order to hit this stupid generator. Literally, if they had been tied down facing opposite directions, they'd have died instantly. Not to mention the variety of absolutely insane events that unfold throughout the runtime.
And Lightning McQueen just blasted away, hooked to the now rocket-propelled tow truck.
Not to mention the fact that they just summon random new abilities whenever they get into any kind of trouble at all. There's no attempt at setups and payoffs, it's just, oh, don't worry, I have an emergency backup Gatling gun, and parachute, and tire grenades, and...
Done.
Oh, Miss Schiffwell.
They're standard issue now.
You kids get all the good hardware.
Really? And all of this leads to the most nonsensical payoff in any movie I have ever seen. This film is so blatantly idiotic that even the characters in the movie are aware of it.
Please, come on. None of this happened. Rocket jets, flying spy cars.
No, you're quite right. It does sound a bit far-fetched.
But you know what Cars 2 doesn't do? It doesn't blatantly assassinate its characters. It doesn't regress Lightning McQueen all the way back to how he was at the beginning of the first film. It doesn't turn characters they wanted you to take seriously into a joke. It doesn't undo the development between McQueen and Sally. In fact, any opportunity the characters from Radiator Springs get to do something, they all act consistently with who they've been established to be and contribute something meaningful to the film, even if in the most seemingly minor of ways. And it doesn't even dare to touch McQueen and Mater's friendship. It doesn't rip them apart from each other with no justification. But Toy Story 4 does assassinate its characters. Toy Story 4 has every single problem that Cars 2 has, from lazy contrivances to impossible scenarios and simple breaks in logic, and only adds to the pile by destroying Woody, Buzz, and Jessie. This is Pixar's worst film, and it's not even close. Nothing they ever make from here on out can possibly dethrone this abomination. But even putting aside all the indefensible logical problems with this movie, and the fact that it completely and utterly nullified every meaningful message and character arc throughout the series, this film's path of destruction doesn't just stop at the end of this film, it also tarnished Incredibles 2. Because while it may be easy to forget as time passes, Toy Story 4 was supposed to come out in 2017, but was then delayed to 2018 as Cars 3 got pushed up, and was then delayed again to 2019 as Incredibles 2 was pushed up. But while Cars 3 may have been able to pull itself together in time and provide a satisfying, full-circle conclusion to Lightning McQueen's story, Incredibles 2 very clearly needed the extra year. It has a hilarious and endearing family dynamic in Bob's storyline with the kids, and it has hair-raising, masterfully choreographed and directed action sequences in Helen's storyline, but it completely wasted the Underminer setup by turning someone who declared war on humanity into a bank robber who immediately runs away. Barely had any scenes with the entire family working together to save the day until the very end of the movie, which is what the entire first film worked to set up, and features one of the most illogical villains in any movie ever. A villain whose entire motivation is to make superheroes illegal in a world where superheroes are already illegal, and she's going to do that by making them legal just to make them illegal again. It is blatantly obvious here that they ran out of time, that they had a far more compelling villain and logical backstory than the sloppy spaghetti mess of a plot that they ended up with, and that if they had that extra year, they could have made this absolutely phenomenal. But then Toy Story 4 came into the picture and ruined it all. It pushed Incredibles 2 up a full year, and as a result, the team had to scramble to get something out the door no matter how flawed it ended up being. And the reason why this delay for Toy Story 4 happened in the first place is because they threw out 75% of the original script as confirmed by Annie Potts, meaning that they had an original story that I can guarantee you made more sense than this trash heap. But then there was a change in leadership, a changing of hands as to who would be taking the reins for this project. So they gave the title to Josh Cooley. When Lee Unkrich was put in charge of Toy Story 3, he was somebody who helped edit the first movie and co-directed the second. He was familiar with the series. He was involved in the creation of the first two. He was someone who very clearly loved these characters and wanted to give them a satisfying conclusion that they deserved after everything they've been through. But Josh Cooley wasn't even at Pixar when the first two films were released, and wasn't involved in the creation of the third movie at all. And yet they made him the director and put him in charge of leading this film to the finish line. Only he didn't just set out to finish what they started. He set out to throw away almost everything the original creative team came up with and shove his own writing into the mix as a replacement. He went out of his way to take the original script and change it to assassinate all these characters and destroy this world and nullify the messages of the original trilogy without a single care in the world. And you know what? Maybe you think that I'm being unfair here. Maybe you think that I've been extremely uncharitable in my assumptions about this director. After all, Hanlon's razor tells us never to ascribe malice to what could easily be ascribed to incompetence. But here's the thing. I've thought about this for the past 2 years, ever since this movie came out. Thinking about this director's track record with making movies, and the way he's spoken about Toy Story 4, I don't earnestly believe that this man is incompetent. I don't. I honestly, truly don't. I believe this movie was nothing but a malicious attack on everything the original trilogy established. Why? Because Josh Cooley was on the writing team for Inside Out. He was one of only 3 people who worked on writing the script for Inside Out, which is one of the best movies Pixar has ever created. He was a story artist on films like The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and Up, and he directed the short film Riley's First Date, which, while it's not exactly one of the best things in Pixar's catalog.
So, what's the dealio with Jordan? OMG, he is awesome sauce. Faux cheesy.
Did she just say faux cheesy?
It still paid respect to the characters of Inside Out and had them all act in ways that were in line with their behavior from the movie. This man knows what he's doing. He's not an idiot. He knows how to make a quality film, and you need look no further than his own director's commentary for this film to see that for yourself.
It actually doesn't make any sense at all why those dappled lights are being projected onto the ground. I like pointing out how our movie doesn't work.
If you really break it down, none of this makes any sense. The fireworks was kind of a late-breaking idea to have fireworks behind him.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all. We never see fireworks for the rest of the movie. It's just behind Duke.
He knows what does and doesn't make sense in a film. This isn't something like Loki, where the people who wrote it were genuinely too stupid to realize that they had destroyed the MCU until they were asked about it after the show was already over. Literally saying that it was a necessary evil to tarnish the first 3 phases of the MCU in a desperate attempt to retroactively justify their decisions. This isn't something like Danganronpa 3, where the lead writer thinks they've created a masterpiece. He is fully cognizant of exactly what he's done here because he hates these characters.
They're such fun characters because they have no connection to our characters, and they're brand new. The fun of this movie, to me, was all these new characters that we can create and bring to life.
And he hates the messages about family that the original trilogy tried to send, and instead replaced them all with shells of their former selves or blatant contradictions to their former selves. And the only way he could make it work was to gaslight you into thinking that Jessie's always been like this and never grew past her fears, that Buzz has always been stupid, and that Woody has always been this insecure about himself and never learned lessons to move past it. This film doesn't work if the audience remembers any of these things. If they remember that Jessie overcame her fears, that Buzz is one of the smartest characters in the series, or that Woody already evolved past all these insecurities throughout the trilogy, then this film immediately ceases to function. So all he can do is try to gaslight you into thinking that this is all totally normal, and then further drive that point home in the director's commentary. And he still has the audacity to stand up on that stage and say into the camera to millions of people that he hopes Woody and Buzz made growing up a little bit easier for them, as he accepts an award that he earned by tearing down those characters that he didn't create, that people loved with all their hearts, leaving behind nothing but a trail of destruction in his wake. Well, guess what, Cooley? Those characters did make growing up easier for me. They've had a greater impact on my life than you could ever wrap your head around. And you destroyed them all without a care in the world, riding off into the sunset as the rotting corpse of Toy Story is sprawled onto the floor behind you, with absolutely no hope of salvation because Pixar has declared this to be the grand finale of the story, despite what was originally intended all those years ago.
Ending up at a landfill and then ultimately heading towards the belching inferno of an incinerator, that's the end. That is the end. There's nothing beyond that. And I thought, if we're going to end this trilogy in a big way and really push the toys to the brink, I thought that we should take them to the dump.
It was supposed to be the end. It was supposed to stop here. But you wouldn't let the franchise stop here. Not so long as you had characters you could assassinate and a world you could destroy. And then you ran away from Pixar as soon as your work in destroying this series was done, so you could rest and watch the sun rise on a hateful universe as they watch in horror what you've done as they realize that now there's nothing left that can salvage this series. We can't look to the future at an upcoming project and hope that it will save the day because there's nothing to look to. This is the end of the line. And it's all your fault. You've ruined this. You've destroyed it all. And you did it all with a crooked smile on your face that looks like it belongs in a villain of your company's own making. He has absolutely no respect for this franchise, and as a result, I have absolutely no respect for this director after what he's done. He may claim to love Toy Story.
I love Toy Story. I saw the first two before I started working here at Pixar, and so to be asked to direct this movie was such a huge honor and terrifying because I didn't want to mess it up.
But actions speak louder than words. It doesn't matter if I say I love something if I'm simultaneously plunging a knife into that same thing, because in case it's not clear, he doesn't believe he's done anything wrong. After Bungie made Halo 2, they admitted they massively screwed the pooch and used what they learned from their failures to craft an ingenious, triumphant send-off to the original trilogy with Halo 3. After Capcom made Apologise as Ace Attorney, they worked tirelessly to systematically fix every single thing that game broke with its subsequent releases, and restore the world back to a sense of not just cogency, but to a point where it can finally be called a masterpiece again. And when 343 released the broken, buggy mess that was the Master Chief Collection, they not only admitted that they screwed up, but spent the next 7 years working to fix what they broke from campaign to multiplayer across every installment, and are still working to this day to continually improve the experience and add new content, fix long-standing issues, improve the graphics, add more accessibility options, and enhance the performance across all platforms, culminating in what is easily the best legacy collection available in gaming. But Josh Cooley believes that what he did to these characters was in the best interests of everyone, and that massive ego was only further inflated when they handed him that shiny trophy, so he'll coast through the rest of his life by resting on his laurels with an unshakable belief that destroying beloved characters leads you to great success. And judging by the audience's reaction to this garbage, there's nobody else in the world that will ever try to convince him otherwise. So take your Looney Tunes ripoffs, Evel Knievel failures, and neurotic spork with you as you go right off into your next project that puts another massive paycheck in your pocket, and go fuck yourself to infinity and beyond. Well, that was just about the most mentally taxing thing I've ever done. Even in spite of the several consecutive 24-hour periods of time that I spent editing my Danganronpa 3 series back in June, and out working on those videos nearly brought me to my knees, this series was still the most emotionally draining thing I have ever created because I love Toy Story. I don't know that there is a piece of art on this planet that is more intrinsically linked to my heart than this series, because outside of things like Baby Einstein's, the Toy Story movies were some of the first pieces of content that I ever consumed in my entire life, and these stories and characters helped me through some of the toughest periods in my life. I even watched them on their VHS tapes. That's how long I've been watching these movies. In fact, they're the only VHS tapes I still own. I didn't realize how much I cared about this world and how attached I was to these characters until I saw them all torn down in this movie. Because sitting in the theater on opening day watching this movie was like being stabbed in the heart over and over again for 90 minutes. I've wanted to make a video tearing this film to shreds and explaining how it destroyed everything about the original trilogy ever since I walked into that theater over 2 years ago. And now, the work is done. I can finally rest now, knowing that I've done my job and drawn attention to this dumpster fire, because good Lord Almighty, the world was way too kind to this movie. Whether it was because they were dazzled by the pretty lights, reminded of their childhood by the music, or just because they liked seeing the Toy Story toys do stuff, I have no idea, but the world did not give this film the proper dose of analytical decimation that it deserved, and I finally decided to change that. And with that, the series is now over, and what an insane journey it was. Thank you all for sticking through the end of the series. I certainly had a lot to say, and I hope you found my commentary insightful. If you want to hear me tear more awful stories to shreds, then you're in luck. You heard me mention earlier that I previously made a series called Danganronpa 3: The End of My Sanity, which goes beat by beat through all 24 episodes of the Danganronpa 3 anime and explains in great detail how badly it nuked everything the 3 Danganronpa games established. Fair warning though, this show is significantly darker than Toy Story 4 and is rated TVMA because of extremely graphic scenes depicting both violence and extremely uncomfortable imagery for, other reasons. As a result, I am much more vulgar there than I was here without censoring my vocabulary at all. Once again, viewer discretion is advised. On the other hand, if you just want a video of pure uninhibited praise of something that I love with all my heart, then my Dragon's Lair 3D video is exactly what you're looking for. It is a video covering the single most underrated video game I have ever played and what is in turn my favorite game of all time. It's a game that doesn't get the attention that it deserves and that goes largely undiscussed in online spheres because while everyone knows about the arcade game, the home console version slipped right under the radar and the fact that it did is an absolute crime. So I poured every ounce of passion I had into that script to break down what everyone's missing out on by not playing this game, from its subversive and engaging story, to its orgasmic music and mesmerizing atmosphere, to its endlessly compelling gameplay and finely tuned level design. If you're looking for a new game to play and you want to see if this will be up your alley, then I can't recommend this video enough. And if you're enticed to check it out for yourself afterwards, then by all means go play the game. I promise you won't regret it. As for future videos, my next big project is going to be a critique of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. This video has been a long time coming and it's been in production for almost a full year now, steadily doing research into other people's reactions and defenses of this game to help build my most comprehensive analysis of any piece of art that I've ever created. I've been working on it in the background while I was busy tearing this film to shreds, but now, there's no other analysis videos on the horizon, except my Apollo Justice video. It's been a long time coming, and I promise to do the best I can to make it worth the wait and do this game justice, if you will. But with that, I gotta get back to work. Still plenty of production left to be done on that Apollo Justice video, in addition to preparing to wrap up my current LPs in anticipation of December's 2 big projects. I want to close out the year's content strong, so I'll be slipping back into production mode for the foreseeable future. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming along this adventure with me. Be sure to check out my other analysis videos if anything I've described today piqued your interest, and beyond that, I hope to see you all soon for whatever you decide to watch next. So long, partners.